So pulses are kind of the new buzzword, the new superfood that's going around, and they're a great source of many different nutrients. First, pulses, great source of plant-based protein. So you're getting all of those great benefits of vegetables and plants, along with protein like you would get from meat. They're really packed full of fiber, which not glamorous, but keeps you regular, but also makes you feel full for longer, which can stop you from overeating at meals or tide you over to other meals. They're very, very rich in iron. Actually, one serving of pulses has the same amount of iron as 3 ounces of steak, and steak is one of the most highest in iron of the meats. Great source of folate, same amount of potassium as banana in a serving, and they're also really low in fat. So there's a lot of things that you can do to cut fat in your diet. Adding in pulses to things that are normally high in fat can actually do that. So for instance, if you are making hamburgers at home from scratch, red meat, typically a high source of fat from meat. If you kind of cut it with some lentils or some chickpeas, it really enhances the flavor but also kind of decreases that fat intake. And of course, gluten-free, which is great. Not only are pulses great for your health, they're great for the environment. Actually, the UN is backing a lot of campaigns to increase awareness of pulses, which is really interesting because, they think that pulses could be one of the answers in terms of feeding the world. So our normal agriculture, a lot of the times we have to use chemical pesticides in the soil, which increases greenhouse gases, but pulses actually leave behind beneficial nutrients when they're grown, which help to decrease the amount of chemical pesticides that we need and decrease greenhouse gases. So all around, if I haven't convinced you, pulses are a great, great thing to add into your diet. Hopefully Kyle can make some delicious dishes for you that can further convince you.
Okay. So how many people cook with like dried beans at home and pulses and things like that? Okay, so you guys are buying them dried? Okay. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the best ways to cook them. One thing you definitely want to make sure you do is soak them for at least 3 or 4 hours overnight. A full day is best. The longer they soak, they'll cook more evenly. You do want to make sure that you go through everything and try to pull out like broken ones like this or like this split halves that look like that. They'll definitely like cook much quicker and get mushy and kind of mess with the liquid that it cooks a little bit. So you definitely want, like I said, you definitely want to soak them overnight and then really cook them as low as possible. I'll actually let my beans cook overnight. I'll turn them on before I go to bed and let them cook all night until the morning. One of the best ways to actually cook them is in a crock pot. It's one of the very few things that I would actually use a crock pot for. But just for the simple fact that it holds a very consistent low temperature for a long time, and you don't really have to worry about it getting too hot. And also, one thing I wanted to talk on is if you're buying canned chickpeas, one of the big things right now that people are using a lot is the liquid from that. It's actually called aquafaba, which will whip up. It'll almost make like a meringue if you whip it up. And when it cooks, it actually gelatinizes a little bit. So you can actually use it as an egg substitute in baked goods. So if you're making like vegan brownies or things, you can actually just substitute that equally for eggs, and that'll work. So the first thing we're going to start making today is a coconut chickpea curry, and which I believe both of these were over there if everybody tried them. The second thing we're going to make is a black bean and chickpea salad. So I have some black beans and chickpeas up here that were soaked and cooked off earlier. Sorry, for this I'm just going to start with a little bit of white onion. Start getting my olive oil hot in my pan. Can everybody see that pot? Okay, good. Start with that. So, so we're going to start getting our onions and just a little bit of garlic going in here. There we go. The heat went off. Yes?
Can you talk about using non-stick pans? Because people were saying those aren't good or because
So I would say non-stick pans are perfectly fine for most things. Where you'll run into issues with non-stick pans is when you're trying to brown something. So if you're searing like a piece of meat, like a chicken or a fish, it's more difficult to really get like a really good sear and brown those on. Personally, like I actually cook with cast iron a lot at home. So pots like these are really nice, and they're kind of naturally non-stick. They don't have the coatings on them. They hold heat very well. And if you get the ones that are, like if I can grab this now, but if you see the inside of that, the inside of it's glazed, which will act as a non-stick. But in all reality, if you're using just a normal stainless pan, as long as they're heavy, just the one thing I'll say is just make sure you're not putting anything in a cold pan. So make sure your pan is always hot before anything goes in it, even the oil, and then make sure the oil has a sufficient time to heat up before you put any food in it. You should really hear like a good sizzle when anything goes in there. Okay, so we've got our onions and garlic cooking down now. Turn this down a little bit. So you want these to kind of sweat out. You don't really want to brown anything too much. Okay. With that, let me start dicing this pepper for later. Clean this out. Okay, so now I'm going to add my curry powder to this. A little bit of cumin to that. And a little bit of coriander to that as well. So I always like to take all of my spices and kind of cook them into the oil a little bit, just to make sure that it'll toast it a little bit, bring out a little bit more flavor. And then what we're going to do is just add our chickpeas to this and kind of try to toast them off a little bit as well. How's it smell? Oh, now I'm making a mess. All right. Okay. Once they toast off a little bit, I'm going to take some of my diced tomatoes, add your diced tomatoes to it. And one thing you also could do is actually cook your chickpeas in this, and then you'll get the curry and stuff to actually like cook into the chickpea itself, and it'll actually help thicken the broth. You would just have to start with the water that you would normally cook the chickpeas in. And then what I'm going to do is actually just hit this with our coconut milk to finish it off, and I'm going to turn it down at that point. One thing about coconut milk is if you get a good coconut milk, it's really nice and creamy and will stay that way until it boils. So as soon as you boil a coconut milk, it's almost gonna separate. It's gonna act almost like a little bit of like a curdled milk, like if you were to boil milk and it started to separate on you. So once you do add your coconut milk, you want to make sure you turn down the heat low so that it simmers, and that'll keep it from getting. It almost acts like it's watery instead of thickening up for you. So we're gonna let this. Oh, one out again. So we're just going to let that simmer for a couple minutes and we'll come back to it. And we're going to start on our salad now. Okay, so I'm actually going to make the dressing first here. Set this aside. So I have one lime that I'm going to zest really quick. I don't have a peeler on me, so I'll just do it by hand. So this is fine. You just want to make sure that you try to get as little of the white pith as possible because it's kind of bitter. So let me just peel that off. And then I'm just going to mince this. Definitely a zester is the easiest way to go with this. Just a little tool, almost looks like a peeler. That'll just take the very outside of the skin off. Okay, so we're starting to boil a little bit here, so I'm actually going to turn that back again. And, sorry, my burner doesn't like to be on low, apparently. Okay, so I've got a little bit of our lime zest here. I'm going to take this, juice it. Okay. Add a little bit of my minced, sorry, I'll move this bowl over here. Add a little bit of my minced garlic to the juice. Actually have a little bit more juice over here that I juiced earlier. I'm going to take this and slowly whisk in my oil. So you can always do this in a blender too, or with a little hand blender, like an immersion blender if you have one of them at home. It's really not super important that this emulsifies perfectly. It's generally going to separate unless you add like a little bit of mustard or something in there if you really wanted it to thicken up and come together. So, okay, so I have that, and then just a little bit of salt and pepper. So again, that's something that's very simple, as you can see. Like, it's separated a little bit, but for the most part, it's emulsified. If it were to sit for a little bit of time, it definitely would start to separate on you a little bit more. So that's really nothing to worry about. Okay, so this is cooking and thickening up a little bit over here. Okay, so we have our dressing. I'm going to get on to our salad a little bit. So we're going to start with our black beans that we cooked and cooled off, our chickpeas that we cooked and cooled off, the rest of our diced tomato that we have over here. I'm going to add a little bit more of our onion to this. And you really can add anything fresh that you want out of this. Any different herbs that you might have growing on your garden for the next week or two until we get another frost in there. Pretty much gone. So I'm just going to take this and julienne them a little bit. Add them in onto our salad. Take a few of my green onions here. Now these are wilted, so I'm going to get rid of the tops. Now for something like this, you can actually use the green onions all the way down to the white. You'll get the white parts will have a little bit stronger of a flavor, but it'll work fine for this. So just okay. Add that to there. I have my red pepper that we're going to dice as well and add. Okay. Just a few slices of jalapeno. If you like food very spicy, you can leave these in slices. And after they marinate for a little bit, it'll start to mellow them out and the heat will come out. If you don't like stuff that's too spicy, you can leave them out or dice them up so you won't get so much at once. Okay, and then our avocado. I assume we have a lot of fans of avocado right here. So avocados have been gotten very expensive in the last 3 weeks. Anybody know why? Okay. Yes? Yes. Correct. So we're actually not really into California avocados yet. But what it is, you're correct about the growers' strike. So in Mexico, there's almost like all of the farmers are actually went on strike and stopped picking avocados in all of Mexico. They're really, because the way the avocado market works, I guess, in Mexico is the government actually controls the pricing and takes a cut of all of the growers' profits in doing so. So I guess they did not like the prices that they were getting, so they all just stopped picking their avocados. And it's been going on for about 3 weeks now. So I think if you get a good Mexican or organic avocado, it's probably about $3 or $4 a piece they can be now. So hopefully that gets fixed shortly. But we will be going into the California market fairly soon. Okay, so I've got that in there. I'm going to add a little bit of cilantro to that. Take my dressing, use the whole thing, and then just stir this up. Now you could do this the night ahead. Really, the longer this marinates, the better it'll be. Everything will soak into the beans and the chickpeas. If you are going to do it ahead of time, the only thing I would suggest is leaving the avocados out until you're going to serve it. So there's that. And now it looks like our curry is just about done. Yeah, I can't grab that. But if you guys can see it, it's slowly simmered. And it really did thicken up that broth a lot on here. So that's what you're looking for, is to just simmer it nice and lightly. Again, not boiling it until that broth thickens up. And the starch from the chickpeas and stuff should actually help with that a lot. Okay, yes?
So if you were to do that overnight with raw chickpeas, would you put in the onion and the tomato and garlic and everything in the crock pot and just put on low all
You
night,
could.
or-
You absolutely could, yeah.
And the coconut milk too?
So that's the only thing. I would leave the coconut milk out until the end. Otherwise, it will separate on you at the end. So you almost want to treat it like you're cooking the chickpeas, just with all the spices and stuff in it. And then, like I said, it'll soak up all that flavor into the chickpeas themselves. So, yes?
Do you ever have a problem with your beans exploding on you? And I've had them where, some dry, especially white beans.
Uh-huh.
Instead of getting a nice white bean in the end, I got this exploded
You're cooking them too quickly.
too quickly.
Yeah. So if you should never boil, if a bean boils, that's exactly what's going to happen. In all reality, a white bean, even if you soak it overnight, will take a good 3 to 4 hours to cook properly. So, yeah, crock pot or a stove on very low, which is just what you really need to worry about then is, especially if you're using a gas stove, is just controlling the temperature can be very difficult on that, which is why a crock pot on the lowest setting a crock pot has is your best bet. And like I said, I mean, you can let them go for 8 or 9 hours and just really, really slow, and they'll cook the best that way. So, yes?
How much water to bean ratio do you need?
Generally 2 to 1 water to beans, but I mean, you can never put too much. So, I mean, as long as there's a good amount of water above the beans, and you can always, if you see that it's soaking all of it up, you can always add more. But yeah, the beans are only going to soak up so much water, so you really don't have to worry about putting too much. So, yes?
So when you do cook them in the crock pot, how much water do you use? 2 to 1 in the crock pot, or you
No, I would just say if they're soaked properly, they're really not going to take on a lot of water from that point. They're pretty much rehydrated at that point. So as long as they're covered a little bit, you're fine.
Do you recommend water or like chicken broth?
You can use chicken broth. I generally use water just to keep them more of a neutral flavor. But I'll also cook a large batch for more than just one dish for the fact that they take so long to cook properly. I mean, I use whatever herbs I have. I like lemon. I throw a couple lemons in there. I like them to tend to have a little bit of acidity to them. You can use if you have like a good vinegar, like a good cider vinegar or a wine vinegar, you can add that to it, which will add a little bit of sweetness to them as well. So, yes.
Can you talk about the different kinds of lentils and how you would use them? I mean, there's like green and black and brown.
Yeah,
Red lentils, and they're used for different things.
They are, well, they're kind of grown in different cultures. Lentils are mainly like Middle East, Northern Africa, places like that. But you really cook them all the same way. They tend to, I mean, the most common are green lentils you're gonna find. Red lentils tend to be a little bit firmer and hold up a little bit better. They won't get mushy as easily.
The mush, I thought the red ones were more like dal.
No, they'll stay firm. They can stay firm for you. But yeah, I mean, I would cook them just like a bean. Again, soak them, and the slower you cook them, the firmer they'll stay. So, yes.
Do you ever use a pressure cooker?
I don't for a dry bean because that'll almost act like you're boiling it again, and it can cause them to explode again or just get mushy. Yes.
So after you cook the soybean, how long does it last? Like how long?
I mean, you probably have 5 days to a week. So, any other questions? All right. Yes, sir.
Is there a real advantage to doing this laborious process with the beans rather than just buying them in a can? That's what I mean.
I mean, for me, it's really about getting the flavor that I want into the bean. A lot of canned beans can be canned with a lot of sodium to preserve them. So you do get a lot cleaner flavor with a dry bean, and it does take a long time, but it's not really labor intensive. I mean, really, it's taking a couple minutes to soak them, letting them sit in the fridge for a night, and then the next day, like I said, if you have a crock pot, throw them in the crock pot and just forget about it for 8 or 9 hours, and they'll be fine. So it does take a long time. You kind of got to plan ahead, but it's not that much work, really. Yes, ma'am. You can. You absolutely can. Like, I would rather freeze them than lose them if you're not going to eat them right away. But just they will get a little mushy once you thaw them out. And I would say if you freeze them and then thaw them out, you just make sure that they thaw out naturally. Like, if you try to heat them to thaw them out, then they're really just going to fall apart on you. But that's also fine if you're going to puree them or something like that. Make a bean puree, which I actually make a lot of bean purees to thicken like vegan and vegetarian soups, so to kind of cut cream out. If you have a white bean that you kind of overcook a little bit and then just puree it in a blender, it works really nice in cream soups as a substitute. All right. Good? All right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.